Welcome to, I heard you when you said the only podcast where you get functional health, winemaking, farming, social media, marketing, family, and biofeedback in the same conversation.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Well, introduce our guests.
And as you can hear/see, depending on how you're consuming this, we have one of the very few of our guests that we've ever had on the show. Our third ever guest.
Third ever.
His name is Keith Saarloos.
Hello.
And he is the owner, operator, doer of all things,
Overlord.
as we were just discussing. That's
my title, actually. Yeah.
Overlord. He is the overlord of Saarloos and Sons. What's the official end of that? Saarloos and Sons winery?
Well, I think Saarloos and Sons for us is like I put a tagline on the bottom of Saarloos and Sons for 25 years, which is family, farming operation, vineyards, wine. So those four things, but we also raise cattle as well.
You also forgot that he is the honorary mayor.
Acting mayor.
I'm
the acting mayor of Los Olivos.
Yeah. Acting mayor.
Yeah, I act like it. There's no official mayor, but I act like it. So
I think we could, if we had all the authority.
Yeah.
We'd give it. Overlord falls into that.
Yeah.
Overlord falls into that.
I like describing it as a benevolent warlord. When everything just divulges into like warlord like things, Los Olivos will do pretty well. I'm pretty excited about
that. So to set up some context before we get hot and heavy into it, I met Keith through Stacy, who is likely going to get into the origin story of how she met Keith, more like Keith's dad, Keith's family, through living in the SYV.
Oh, I met Keith before I lived in the SYV.
Oh, you met Keith before the SYV.
Oh, yeah. And Keith pulled up the original email that I sent you today. I was like, do I still have this? From 2015.
Okay. Was I trying to talk you out of living here? Or was I like for it? Was it 50-50? I'm like, listen, man, it's hard. That's all I'm going to let you know.
No, it was before I knew all the things. And it was just a dream. It was just a dream before then. And so how we got here is I literally don't even know how Keith showed up on my feed. I have no idea. But there was an oak tree. And that's all I cared about. And so, it was, I'm like, I want to see this tree. And I read the post and I went to the website and he was talking about vision for 250 years in language that I hadn't seen anybody else talking. And I go home and I say to my husband, I'm like, hey, we're buying this family's wine. And he's like, we don't even drink wine. I'm like, well, we do now. I'm like, I don't hear anybody talk like this. And I want in. I want in on this. So we were still living in Colorado when that happened. Mm-hmm. And so I still watched and followed. I was like, okay, like and for those of you who don't follow Keith on social media, you should. He says more than he actually says. He says a lot and so much more. And if you're paying attention, no, he's not going to write a book. It's on Instagram. But
book is free. Please buy wine.
There you go.
Hold up the bottle. Shameless plug. The entire.
We're not gonna not throw up some honor and prepare here, which Stacy grabbed from her. You've been subscribed
since 2015.
Since 2015.
Yeah.
And then
my kids like eating. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Then once I met you and met Keith, I brought it upon myself to, that was actually, we were talking about this earlier today. It was the first dual investment we ever made. I was like, hey, we're going to buy, I'm going to be a part of the wine club. I put my name on it and we're going to split this and we're going to get it shipped here to Texas. And,
cause I was still living in the Valley.
So that was since,
A year ago.
That
Oh,
was-
more, a little bit more than a year
Yeah,
ago.
maybe like 18 months ago, something like that. So I've gotten several shipments since then. And my wife is a wine drinker, unlike, Stacy and her family, which enjoy wine, but my wife is like, yes, we're actively drinking wine now. She's pregnant right now. She's not actively drinking wine, but
Sure.
we
Don't
love
worry, the wine doesn't go bad. It'll wait.
Yeah. Because I'm the only person who moves, 40 bottles of wine from the SYV to Texas.
That's hey.
So it was packed. It was the thing that was most carefully packed. So I send Keith an email saying like, "Hey, I'm going to be in the Valley. I really want to see this oak tree." And I can't imagine what the response that was, but it was like, "Oh my gosh."
We've heard crazier stuff, but that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, you can. We're in the middle of harvest, and Justin knows that I don't know shit about what harvest is, a city girl from the San Fernando Valley, of what that meant at all. And the only thing I knew was that the email back from Keith goes, "Great. My dad is going to pick you up and then we'll bring you to the vineyard." And so we go pull in front of the tasting room. Larry's there, picks us up, and he's actually on the phone with your brother Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking to Kirk and going, "Yeah, I've got Ted and Stacy in the car." I'm like, why would Kirk know who we are?
Oh.
Like, why is this conversation even happening right now? And I'm like, Ted's in the front seat, I'm in the back seat, and we end up going to get coffee at the little coffee place. And so then Larry brings us to what's that place where you process the wine?
Area
Keith?
51.
Area 51.
Yeah.
And Keith is doing all the things that Keith would do if anybody else came here. And so we're like getting to drink out of the vats and taste the grapes. And the thing that really matters when we made it into the barrel room. And we're in the barrel room, and I can't remember if it was like your dad or you, and you're like, "Well, what do you want to know about wine?" And I'm like, I don't really care about wine. I want to know how you do family. We're not here. I don't know anything about wine. Wine was what got me to say yes, but how do you run a business with your son? How do you do this as a family? And that's really it was that moment I can look back so clearly and go, we all knew like this is not normal. And it wasn't. And then I didn't know that Keith had probably barely slept. And then your dad's like, "Hey, do you want to come see my horses?" And I'm like, I'd love to come see our horses. And we end up at his parents' house and sitting around the table for 2.5 hours and having an amazing conversation. And we didn't move to the Valley for 3 more years.
Yeah.
And that's how it started.
Sounds about right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, it was a long time ago.
Well, number one, thank you for remembering all that. That's shocking. But yeah, the older I get, the weirder it all becomes. It's like where you're saying when you came up and, how do you work with a family, or how do you do all of that? I totally understand where you're coming from with that, because all of this is incredibly weird and difficult. Working with your old man or your mom or your kids or cousins and things like that, but somehow we make it all work.
Well, since we're on that topic,
yeah, what do you guys? I'm a guest. What do you guys want to know?
Well, so let's start with what caught Stacy's attention in terms of you putting your story or your family story, right, so to speak, through your eyes, through your interpretation, and the oak tree struck Stacy, but you've been doing this for a while. I mean, not just the farming aspect of it or the wine making aspect of it, but the I'm going to use the word marketing aspect of it, the storytelling aspect of it. So when did you start really talking about your family's operation on the internet?
It's I think from day one. I mean, that's kind of been a little bit of a point of like who we are, because wine specifically is not the most approachable thing, and you feel like you need to know something about it, or like when you say my wife drinks wine, I don't drink wine, but the truth of it is you do, right? It's like, but but a lot of people say, I don't drink wine because I don't know enough about it to like talk about it, or there feels like there is some sort of invisible line that you have to cross before you're a wine drinker, which I think is a joke, because a lot of wine has been set up in this way where it's like aspirational or separate or elitist, and a lot of that is just, you know, kind of bullshit. And when we started this, it all started with my grandfather. If I go way back, he grew up in Iowa. His father died when he was young. He was kind of on his own since he was 13. His father is a farmer. His father is a farmer, blah, 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 all the way back. And farming was always this kind of noble profession. And as my grandfather moved from Iowa to California when he was like 13 and married, you know, met my grandma, started having kids, because he didn't have that dad, he and my father and my uncle, we had a dairy supply business because Southern California was mostly dairies at that point. And they all were in like one office. Like my grandpa sat here, my dad sat there, and my uncle sat there, and there were no walls. And so me growing up, it was, family is not just important. Family is the first and most important thing. Like I had a great relationship with both sides of my grandparents. And my wife actually, when we were dating, met them before they met my parents, strangely enough. And as we kind of progressed up through it, my dad wanted to grow something from the ground and raise cattle, and you wanted to chase that dream because that was his father's dream. And I always tell everybody, be very careful with what you fall in love with, because your kids will either really love it and be better at it than you, or they're going to despise it. It's 50-50. But when you get to see your parent, you know, doing something they truly love that like sets them on fire, you get to see the best of them. And that is very inspirational. And my dad saw that with his dad. My mom and dad bought a place up here as a real hunk of shit. And it was 14,000 Fuji apple trees. And we farmed it for a full year and failed at it and had to tear it out and replant it into grapes. And growing grapes is kind of the songwriting process of wine, and winemaking is the performance, right? There's a big difference between those two, but you can sing a great song poorly, but you can't. The only way to sing a really great song is to start with a really well-written, beautiful song. And I was living up here. We just had a kid. We were selling grapes, and we weren't going to make it. You know, it was just, it wasn't enough. Had a couple coffee shops. We were doing everything we could to survive. Had another kid on the way, and just like my mom said, why don't you tear out the apples and put in grapes? My wife, you know, it was one of those moments where I was at the end of my rope, and I'm like, we're not going to make it, and I don't know what to do. And really at kind of one of the lowest points in my life. And she's like, I think you need to do the wine thing, because I was literally selling wine that we had made from our vineyard off the back of my truck, paying the house payment with it. And so to answer in a long way, a very short question, I just put people I loved on bottles because I figured we got one shot at this. And by having one shot at it, it was just like, this is either going to succeed or it's going to kill me. It was 50-50. And I just threw everything I had at it. And I just started being very transparent and very honest, and writing every day, even though I'm horribly dyslexic, and everything I write takes 3 times the effort that anybody else. But I feel like wine has given me so much. It gives me a way to feed my family, to work with my family, to put pictures of people I love on bottles, to keep family members alive. You know, we make a wine for my great uncle John called Courage, and he died in World War II, D-Day +6, and we get to put him on a bottle, and so we get to talk about him. You know, he's not lost to history, and everything was just like, if you're going to do it, you got to go all the way and be completely transparent. You know, dump your soul out on the dirt every single day. Put pictures of people you love on bottles, and not hold back. And so when the marketing is not really marketing, you know, the marketing is just is me not lying. And usually marketing is people lying to convince you. And I didn't want to do that. You know, I wanted to be as brutally honest as we possibly can be, and build longer tables, not taller fences, and invite people in, because what I want is people to find out about wine, taste it, enjoy it, understand that this is a beautiful thing of taking our grapes that we grow and giving it a shot at immortality in wine, so that, you know, years later you can go home and pop a bottle with people you love, and hopefully all of that comes screaming out in your glass. And I can't think of another thing I can do that would let me do all of those things. And it might kill me still, but, you know, it
Well,
feels
you do
worth
a
it.
really good job.
Sorry about that being so long. You're gonna get a lot of long.
No, we knew. I told Justin, I'm like, this will be the longest one we do,
Yeah.
and I don't want it to be shorter, and there's no reason not to. And
Keep asking questions. I'll keep answering them.
I know you will, and I hope it doesn't feel like work for you today, because there's stories that I want to hear you tell that I've gotten to hear, you know.
Yeah.
But also maybe remind you of things that you do really well from eyes that we didn't get to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. Like we got to live life in passing and have like conversations in passing, but only a few times we actually sat down and got to have good conversations.
I am a lot of people, like, you know, like you guys or people that I know that have moved here, that like we're wine club members or come here a few times, and they're like, I want to live here. Right. Or something. I go, just so you know, you won't see me that much. And they're like, what do you mean by that? We're going to live there. And I'm like, dude, I am moving nonstop. And so there isn't peace to this. You know, it's like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm here, I'm there, I'm moving a ball forward, you know?
Well, and that's the truth of even just living in a small town. You have the joy of seeing each other in passing, and when you get to have bigger conversations, they're spontaneous. They're usually in like, "Hey, come in for a coffee," and we're like, "I've got 20, let's go." Or
anybody who goes, I want to meet with you, I go, I'll see you at the coffee shop at 8 a.m. after I drop my son off at school, and then you got about a half hour, so let's go. You know, that's pretty much how it rolls.
Justin likes to give me a hard time because when he and I met, my hair was purple. And so I was like, that's mostly the only version Keith knows of me when I had purple hair walking in the valley.
People are good people. It doesn't matter what color their hair is.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you. See, Justin? No, is that you do such a good job at bringing people in and taking something that feels super elevated and making it attainable. Like even the things of, and you're so free for the time that you don't have with your time and the gifts that you give to people. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard a story or watched you say no. Like, I can even think from my own family, I'm like, hey, can we go take photos in the vineyard? Yeah. What do you need? Like anytime either me or anybody in my family was like, and I'm horrible at asking for things.
Sure.
And so even that day that we accidentally met you in the coffee shop, I had wanted to take Justin to the vineyard, and because he knew the story about your dad and how we got there and everything. And he's the only other farmer I know. So I was like, I want you to see this place that's super special to me, that this family is super special, was that you're super generous and you bring people in really well so they can understand something and enjoy something they may have never touched, not just from the wine, but from walking through the vineyard and be like, hey, come here on Saturday. Like, just show up at the gate. I'm going to tell you this story, and it brings something to life in people that makes them tell their stories better. And I so appreciate the way that you do it. It was one of the things that was the most attractive to like 10 years ago of like, there's no pretense here. And in 10 years, I still have not one time gone like this is who he is. This is exactly who he is all the time.
Well, I wouldn't say it is who I am all the time. You know, the person I think that gets the least of it is usually my wife, right? Because it's like all of this is very, very hard. And when you know, when you're in anything and you step out your front door, you're on stage, right?
Sure.
And you are out there, hey, well, how can I help? Pulling someone out of the mud, doing whatever, positive. And then you walk through your own door, the tank is empty, right?
Fair.
And she does not usually get always the best of me. I'm working on that, but yeah, that's kind of the goal, right? The life is hard, and it's harder when people are pricks. And if you have a chance to make somebody's day better, or be generous or helpful or whatever, in all honesty, it usually costs you nothing, right? What does it cost you? It costs you a minute or a time or just saying yes or whatever, right? That's it. That's pretty much all it's going to cost you. But for some reason, people feel like they're holding on to something that I don't know what it is, but it can't be that valuable, right? It's like your time is, sure, you're busy, right? Everybody's busy. Everybody's got stuff going on, but a few minutes here or there doing the right thing is never going to take away more than it gives you. And the more you can help, and the more you can do nice things, and the more you can be positive, the lighter the load you make for everyone. I've learned that my entire life. My grandparents, my parents, and then that's something we want to teach our kids. It's very interesting that you hold up that honor and prepare bottle, because that, to me, is always kind of that's our family creed, which is we live to honor those that have come before us, and we prepare the way for those yet to come. And so in anything that I do, my goal is to honor the people who gave me my name, and make sure that the kids coming up underneath us, right, realize that we need to make a better version. Like my dad was a better version of my grandpa. Hopefully I'm a better version of my dad. Hopefully my kids are better versions of me. And that perpetuates forward. And for us, that's always the goal. We don't make wine, we're building a family, and wine just happens to be the byproduct. That's our goal.
That's
Thank you for saying all the nice things. I appreciate that. I don't honestly have the shelving for any of that, which is that's another thing I'm working on. Somebody's like, "Hey, I got to talk to you about this," and I'm like, usually my wife gets real upset with it, because I'll go like this, like that, because it's like I don't know what to do with a compliment, right? It's like if somebody hey, it's like they're handing me some emotional trophy or something, like I did something good, and then I just put it right here, and it just falls down and hits my feet, and I don't know what to do with it ever. And my wife's like, just say thank you. I really appreciate it. And usually I just lock up, and I'm like, I can't do it. I don't know what to do with this.
Well, I figured I was going to shoot my shot, because it's easier when we're not in the same room together.
Well, they talk about it's like men don't need therapy. Men start podcasts. You know what I mean? Or they go golfing. Is that
why we're here?
Yeah, and look, you see how you're sitting side by side and looking into a camera? It's like, what men hate is eye contact, right? It's like emotional eye contact. If you sit side by side and there's a microphone, people will bare their souls, people will go into the depths of the basement and just drag it out for everyone to see, and then they'll upload it. Versus just talking to your buddy and looking them dead in the eyes and being like, how are you doing? And they're like, fine, I guess. I gotta go. So yeah.
Oh man,
men don't need therapy. That's why there's so many podcasts. It's just people that are emotionally just destroyed, just sitting side by side and buying $100 worth of mics and just bearing their souls to the world.
It's the short circuit. It's the short circuit in the male dominated brain.
Totally. It's like,
okay.
You want to go to therapy? I would never go to therapy. Hey, bud, you want to start a podcast and not look at each other? Yes, I definitely do. Let's do it. So tell me about your childhood. Oh my gosh. It all started with my dad, and it's that's what podcast is. It's just radiotherapy.
Oh my God, Keith, were you sitting in this office this week? Because literally we changed some things up around here, and I'm like, hey, when we're recording the podcast, it's better if we look at each other, and you just look at a screen that nobody is there.
So much more comfortable.
But I'm sitting right here. Could you not look at me? He's like, I don't want to look at you.
No. That's why when you have like those really hardcore conversations with like your wife, it's always better that like you're just leaning back, staring at the TV and like bearing your soul. Because if I look directly at her, I'm like, oh no, she's gonna catch me.
You know what we need to do, Keith? We need to sit back to back and just talk to the wall, but record it as a podcast.
Totally. That's why guys, when they go on long road trips, they're like just baring their hearts to each other while they're staring out the front glass, man. Just put a piece of glass in front of two guys and a microphone and they'll just talk forever. Great.
Oh,
That's good stuff.
That's gold. It makes it, well, and I don't know, especially because, I mean, having lived in the same town and getting a different perspective, is that when you are a member of society in a small town, like people, everybody has their ideas about you. And so, or their stories, or people want to know, and in all of that. But there wouldn't have been a context other than when we had this opportunity. And I love that you and Justin set this up without me, was like, not that I waited to tell you what I see, but the opportunity, because when we're standing at El Rancho, what am I giving you 10 years of what I got to see that I never told you that I got to see? Like while we're ordering a sandwich, when my kid's running down the aisle and, you know, some tourist, you know, is crossing the street in the wrong way. And so I was so looking forward to this, because I'm like, I wonder what's going to come out today that Keith doesn't know, but I've just gotten to carry for a little bit. And I knew that compliments weren't going to land well, and I don't give them if they're not deserved. It's more of me just telling you what I see.
I appreciate
that most people don't see.
Hey, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Look at you. Look at you.
Look at that emotional growth. That was great. I'm not staring directly at you. I'm just looking off to the side of the screen and reciting in my head. That was good.
It's okay. You two can look at each other. It's fine. He does the same.
I mean, by the end of the podcast, Keith's going to be like, he's going to be ready to like to be somebody else's therapist. By the end of it.
Nobody needs that.
I'm sure he's plenty of people's listening ear, whether he wants to be or not. But the thing that struck me about you, Keith, so like Stacey's talking about, we set this thing up, was and it was almost out of the blue that I texted Stacey, was like,
oh, it was out of the blue. I was literally in the valley and get this text.
And Stacey was like, I actually, the first text was, hey, I think we need to have Keith on the podcast. And the second text was, correction, we are having Keith on the podcast. When do you think is the best time to do this? And so she was like, I don't know. Why don't you shoot him a message? And here we are. So it was pretty much that simple. But the reason why, and I read pretty much every email that I get from you guys as far as it comes to allocation, because the storytelling emails, right? The allocation emails are the ones that's like, hey, this is what's coming. It's not like a, I mean, unless it's like a general, like, here's the thing that we, you know, for this occasion, but it's the allocation emails. It's like, hey, here's the story of these bottles, and here's these people that mean something to us. And every time I read one, I was like, man, I'm so envious of that, because my family farms rice, soybeans, and corn in Arkansas. So we're row crop farmers in Arkansas. And I have generations of people, you know, that I would love to honor as well, right? And it's the same deal, is that we don't sell a hard, go to the store and buy it. Well,
commodity product versus a finished product.
Right. And so, and we're not directly marketing, you know, straight from family to family. And so in that respect, I was like, man, I would love, that was really the impetus because of the story. So that's why I was asking you, hey, how long have you been doing this, and how long have you been telling the story? Because that's what struck me as, this is not just the guy I want to get to know. Like Stacey said, this is the family I want to get to know. And it could be, I mean, it could, like you said, wine makes it very conducive because it is something that people come together around, and you're working to, you know, no pun intended, you're working to take it off the shelf and put it on people's table and go, hey, you don't have, it's funny, nobody talks about being snobby when you drink Michelob Ultra, but you have to know how to taste wine, right? To drink wine.
Which is like, wine has like most things in life, you know, things have like horrible marketing issues. Right. And one of the things I've wanted to do, and I think we've, you know, I'll never say we did it, but it was like just little things that made sense, because when we opened the tasting room, I'd never really gone wine tasting. I didn't, it wasn't something I wanted to do. It was something I had to do. And as my wife said, it's probably like the only thing that's everything I've ever been good at. And so we put like chairs out front. Like there weren't chairs at tasting rooms when we started, and people said you're going to fail, right? We have cupcakes here that we partner with Enjoy Cupcakes, Kevin and Amber, for the last 16 years, because we wanted something small for the community, for kids. And when you came in, you can eat a cupcake and drink some wine, because that's when your friends, when you have a party or get together at your house, the people who stick around and help you take out your trash, and then you actually open the good bottle of wine, because you judge your friends by the wine you serve them, right? You open a bag of Chips Ahoy, and all of a sudden you're drinking really good wine with cookies, and it kind of brings it all down, right? And that's what it should be. Wine is community. I'm a Christian. I like to say I'm doing the Lord's work. The first miracle was water into wine, and that's because his mom made him do it. Never forget that. His mom's like, we ran out of wine. You got to do something, which makes me think that his mom, he'd done that for his mom before, straight up kind of a thing. Because she's like, you got to do the thing, And if you've met my mom, we ran out of wine at my brother's. My brother got married and had a California reception here, and we ran out of wine in an hour. And my mom handed a big roll of money, like, you need to go buy wine at the store. This is like previous to anything. And we went and bought a bunch of wine and brought it back. And that changed my philosophy on the Bible real quick, because it was like, it means Mary went like this. She was at a party for 7 days, and they're like, they're out of wine. We got to keep this party going. You got to do the thing. And he's like, no, it's not my time. I can't. She's like, dude, bring him whatever he needs. And she walks away, and he's like, geez Louise, I guess I got to do this, right? So making wine, it is such a bonding opportunity. I mean, you very rarely do we even sit down and all have the same meal anymore, right? If you go out to dinner with 4 people, everybody's ordering what they want. Even in families, somebody grabs this or DoorDashes that or whatever, and everybody's having their own compartmentalized experience, right? But when you bring out a bottle of wine, it is the one thing, other than, say, turning on music and like setting a vibe in a house or somewhere where everybody kind of vibes up together, or a major sporting event, or something that like brings everybody together, like community. Wine is that, right? You open a bottle, there's 4 glasses of wine in there, bing, 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 4 people. You just put it in your glass, you're sitting on it. And wine is the thing that makes you wish the day would never end, right? Like right now, we've gone through 5 years of every 6 weeks, there's a once in a lifetime event that is catastrophic in some nature. And we're all like just shell shocked, right? And we've all been shot at. Something's happened. We believe this thing. It either is turned out to be, you were a conspiracy theorist and now it's true, or it was something where you're like, that's wrong. And people have isolated themselves. Like the term social distancing worked, right? They won. They won with that term because we have distanced ourselves from community across from each other, where now we don't come to the middle and have a conversation. We write each other off. But wine, when you open that bottle and it goes in the glass, you're having a shared experience. Every single person is tasting the same thing, enjoying the same thing. And you open a bottle of wine when you're optimistic, when you're like, wow, today was a great day. Let's open a great bottle of wine. Let's relax. Let's take it slow. And that's what I really like about what we do is you get to later on time travel back to, say, 2001, open a bottle of wine, share it with people you love, create community, wish today would never end, and have you look forward to tomorrow. And there's nothing else that does that, right? There's nothing else that you can open and share and have that shared experience and slow down and enjoy other than wine, because you can go have beers with your buddies, but you're drinking 12 ounces of selfishness, right? You can go have everybody's mixing their own cocktail the way they want, or But when you open that bottle of wine, even if there's 10 people, everybody gets a little bit, and communion is community. It's bringing everybody together. And that's a really weird, esoteric way to say that I think wine is one of the most beautiful things you can create, because it, like you were saying, a commodity product, a grape, it used to be a grape and now it's wine, and we give our farming a shot at immortality in a bottle. And that is, it makes it very worthwhile, right? We get to take farming and turn it into art, and so people can enjoy it with people they love. It's like, yeah, it's a pretty good thing to do with your life, I guess. It's hard as shit, but it feels worth it,
Well, I mean, obviously couldn't have put together a better description than of what, like you said, what you're trying to do and what you are doing and what you're continuing to get better at doing. I mean, it's what attracted Stacy, 10 years ago, and what attracted me, 10 days ago, whatever it was.
Hopefully we're getting better at it. That's the thing that I'm always striving for.
Well, I mean, I love seeing like your mom and those people in your family in the videos to tell the story, because I know that, yes, you're right. Wine is what people do to slow down. They come together, that type of thing. But just where your sustenance comes from in general, food, or wine, or whatever it is, farming is probably the most misunderstood sector of any thing in our country. Now, manufacturing has its own.
Are feeding the other 99% 3 times a day. And without a farmer, you would be naked, sober, and hungry. And
and nobody wants any of those things.
No. And the vilification of it makes me understand that if I've learned anything in the last few years, is that if someone with a very loud megaphone is vilifying something, we should run at that thing, not away. That's it's not a burning house we should run out of. That's the house we should run into. And when I think of farming and what we've even learned in the last few years, like, fact check all this stuff, but it's like organic farming is great because you get a sticker, but on the other side of it, we're losing 2 pounds of organic soil for every 1 pound of food we're producing from it. The fact that we have to sterilize those fields in order to plant there. The fact that you think they're not using chemicals, they're just using different chemicals.
Right.
What we should be striving for is, how do we feed the most amount of people the highest quality possible fuel that we can in an ethical way that allows a farmer to be able to do it again next year. Because the hardest part with farming to me is it's razor thin. It's always razor thin, and it takes an incredible amount of money to do it. But every farmer I know, once it crawls into your skin, man, that's it. You're a farmer the rest of your life. You can't stop doing it, because once you grow something from the ground and you look at that, and my dad said it best. It's like, farming is a man's vain attempt at pregnancy. And you're like, we're going to be pregnant again. We're going to have a harvest. We're going to do this. We're going to make this thing's getting delivered. Let's go. You will do everything you can to do it again next year. Right. And because it is so satisfying. And in a world where we think we want to be happy, but we are trading satisfaction for happiness, and we don't really get either. People are so disconnected from, what they're eating, where it's from, because we eat globally. We're raising our own cattle now, so we have a top 1% herd in the United States. And why are we doing that? Because we want to be able to sell beef to an end consumer that we know is ethically raised, did so much good in its life, renewed the soil by eating these hillsides and then fertilizing it and turning that soil over, that we've even in the last few years of like really getting after it. We've seen a total biodiversity shift even in our own property, and saying like, oh wow, this is good. You know, we offer Saarloos and Sons 4-legged fire protection. Like, I love 3 things: puppies, babies, little old ladies. That's kind of my wheelhouse of people I really like. Everybody else, I'm like, whatever. So like we turn out cattle on a bunch of little old ladies' hillsides.
Mm-hmm.
They feed them, you know, heads of lettuce and carrots and stuff. And I'm like, okay, you know, but they eat down their hillside. So if there's a fire pressure, where the fire break, like the fire department sets up where we have our cattle, because the fire isn't going to hit those hills. We're rotationally farming even our hillsides where the cattle eat it down to a chlorophyll level, and then we'll move it over so those hillsides are not overconsumed. And we've seen mustard grass like go down, because that's a weed and it usually only grows in places where it's been over farmed or over consumed by cattle. So we're even growing all of our own forage mix on our own property and dry farming it to feed our own cattle. So we're trying to create this little bio loop on what we're doing. And more so than that, you know, again, when the government says, oh, no-till farming's the way to go. And I'm just like, I don't think so. And we've been actually increasing the quality of our soil with tilling, with putting biomass back into it. And we're raising our humus like 1%. And if you raise your humus by 1%, you raise your water retention by 100%. So we're doing a lot of like wild, weird stuff, like even planting wildflower seeds in between our rows to introduce competition. And that competition is healthy. We're putting beets in our soil. We're ripping that back in so that now the vine is actually having to struggle, creating better fruit. But we're also making our soil more enriched. So when you go into farming, again, if we could feed the most amount of people ethically and have a high yield and a consumable product where you can find an end consumer, you know, where if you can eat within 15 miles of your home, like I'm a testament to it. I mean, I lost 80 pounds because I changed my diet. That was it. And because of it, I feel better. I'm getting healthier. And it's all really just changing it from what a government told me, which was the food pyramid, right? Which was like, oh, you should eat cereal and grain and all of this. And then, oh, you shouldn't eat meat. Meat's bad for you, or cows are bad for you, or this is bad for you. And you're like, it seems like everything they're telling us not to do is the thing you should be doing. And I will continue to be very cautious of when, like, they just said, oh, wine's bad for you. And I'm like, that is the craziest shit I've ever heard, because it's like the only thing inside of that bottle is grape juice and yeast. And it's like, it's not a bag of chemicals. Like if somebody's eating a bag of Frito-Lay chips and they're like, yo, dude, I don't drink wine, it's totally bad for you. And they're like, you know, and you're like, I'm pretty sure it's not the wine that's killing you. You know what I mean?
I love that you brought it up, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but I got to watch you transform your health.
Oh yeah.
Like I got to watch it, and here's, if you're open to it, well, I'd love you to share that piece of the story, because
we
have a client who is a sugar beet farmer,
mm-hmm.
and so I got to learn it first from you and your dad. Right. And so not just wine, but I got a curiosity of farming, watching you guys. Oh, and I don't know if you know this story before I get into it, is that I argued with your dad.
Yep.
One time.
You argue with my dad where he just tells you why you're wrong?
We were standing in the vineyard and he pulled grapes off the vine.
Yep.
And he's like, Stacy, go ahead and eat these. And I'm like, okay, like, no problem. I got you. Yep. He's like, throw them on the ground. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no. Yep. Like, I'm not going to throw these on the ground. I'm like, you worked for these. And he like tipped his hat and put his head down and was like, Stacy,
it's okay.
I said, throw them on the ground.
Yeah,
I'm like,
okay.
I've met my match. I'm so not doing this again.
Yeah.
But not just in the wine, it was the curiosity of farming. So then when I met him, I already had that curiosity, and I got to go to his family's farm and like sit in a combine and watch rice be harvested, and even, you know, get to sit on what acres and acres are. And
Yeah.
I had no idea where my food
Oh,
came
yeah.
from, even after all this time. And so now we have a client who is on his own health journey, sugar beet farmer, and I'm listening to those two is kind of like listening to you two together.
Yeah.
But I'm there just mostly to be cute and supportive of listening them talk in a language I don't understand. But I'm so hungry to know, because he's saying the same thing you are, looking at kind of redefining this health metric in an industry that has a lot of stress. It has a lot of unpredictability.
Totally.
And for all of the stress, for all the financial risk, which I didn't understand completely, and in crop failing,
Everybody
and
should watch
insurance.
Clarkson's Farm. If I can tell anybody to watch a show, Clarkson's Farm has done more for farming on a broad spectrum than any other show ever on television. So Jeremy Clarkson was of Top Gear, and one of the, honestly, the most widely watched television show ever, right? It was on for years and years. And he bought a farm, or had a farm, and decided to farm it himself. And you get to see the struggle of all of it, of the quiet pain that you overcome each day, of like, it's either raining too much, or it's raining not enough, or prices are this, or this is this, or this costs more now, and this is this. And, you know, farmers are notoriously isolated, right? Because you're doing your thing every single day. There's not meetings, there's no PowerPoint presentations. It's just, what shit is the boss today? Because you don't have a boss, but something will be the boss, and then you have to do that. That show was great. I cried numerous times just watching it, because it's like, there it is, you know, the struggle of what it takes. Because, you know, not to spoil the season, but he gets to the end of season 1, and they have a board of what they spent, and and how much they brought in, and then it was a little circle, and it was like they made a couple $100 that year for all of that effort, all of that time, all of that work. And then it leaves, right? It goes somewhere else, and somebody's turning it in, usually to something else. And then the profit is there. But yet we're all struggling to do this each and every year. And so when people go, what, you know, I want to sell our wine for a fair price. And the question is like, why do you do that? And the answer is, so I get to do it again next year. And that's kind of the answer, right? Because there isn't, if there was something else in this world that I could do that would I could provide for my family in a great way that gives me all the other things, I do it in a heartbeat. But there isn't. You know, this is it. The level of satisfaction of harvesting your hay that you grew out of nothing, because you ripped and you dissed and you planted seed, and then it rained enough, and then it came in, and then you got to bale it and put it in the barn, so that now we're just the cattle we're raising is just chewing through it. And I'm like, I hope we don't run out, you know. and now it started to rain. And because it's raining, that seeds will germinate, they'll get down into the lower, wetter soil, and we're going to have an explosion of this beautiful green. And then we're going to be able to move our cattle off our property and let them mow down those hillsides for other people. But I mean, there were hours and hundreds and thousands of dollars of time and effort and expense to put that in the ground just to feed cows, just so we could do it again next year. But it is so satisfying and so rewarding that it's literally impossible to do anything else. It's the great. As my grandfather said, farming is a noble profession. It really is. It's beautiful.
So on that, right? I want to bring it back to your health journey, because it's something that the industry, like, farmers are usually bigger guys.
Yeah.
Like there's no schedule, and getting to hear it from somebody who's doing sugar beets of in harvest season, we got to watch him make changes in his life in the middle of harvest that he couldn't see in in seasons that were more quiet, right?
Sure.
And so having watched you, I'd love for you to tell your story of what was the motivating factor? What was like the pain point that was so big that you're like, hey, I'm not doing this anymore.
Sure.
I am like making a change. And then literally what you did, because you're still your industry didn't change. Your job didn't get easier.
No.
Your stress didn't get less.
No.
Life got harder.
Yep.
And then here you are still 80 pounds down and consistently like,
it
living more
fluctuates a
fully.
little bit, but it's like, I'll be honest. I think like a lot of farmers are bigger guys because, food is pleasure, right? And if you get a chance to like I would say if I eat lunch, 80% of that lunch is eaten in a car, which is not great, right? Because it means you are moving from here to there and you're grabbing something quick because you are so hungry, you're going to, punch out the window because you're hangry. So, for me, my dad passed away 5 years ago, which was a big deal. We were in the middle of COVID. It was kind of screw it a little bit. And it was like, we have a great community around us and people were bringing Thanksgiving dinner basically every day for like 3 months because people were in COVID. People were like, I'll make you a huge dinner tonight. Great. And they'd bring it over and it was like, great, let's go. And, I've always been a big guy, mostly because my dad was, and I guess that just made it okay. And then I got to a point where I was like sitting there and I went, all of this is on me now. And I had to give up some certain things, like stuff I really like to do, but the danger to benefit ratio was like too high. And it's like, yeah, no more dirt bikes, kind of stuff like that. Because if I blow out a knee or hurt my leg, it's like a lot falls down to the ground. So I went to the doctor, did the full blood test, did the whole thing. And then it was like, how's it look? And it's like, not great. And I go, well, what do I need to do? And his joke was like, he goes, lose 50 pounds. I go, lose 50 pounds? He goes, yeah, I told your dad that too. He goes, lose 50 pounds. And I go, okay. And he goes, just like that? I go, yeah, just like that. So I walked out, got in the car, called my wife, and kind of like cried to her on the phone a little bit. And she's like, what's going on? I go, well, the last bit of pleasure in my life is gone. And she goes, what do you mean by that? And I go, I don't know. Now it's like, I've got to change my whole diet. That is it. So rather than grabbing burgers and eating a pizza or doing whatever, because that can dovetail into the world's greatest drug conversation with my kids, which is I said, if you invite people over and sometimes people don't show up and you got 3 pizzas or 2 pizzas or whatever, and I go, has there ever been leftover pizza? And they're like, no. I'm like, most families just take their 2 slices and then that's it. And then they just fold up and put it in the fridge for later. And they're like, yeah, we don't do that. And I said, well, evidently cocaine's better than pizza. So you should never try cocaine, because if you do, you will never be able to stop. We can't stop at pizza. Do not try cocaine. And my daughter goes, that's probably the best drug talk I've ever heard in my life, which I thought was great. But for me, it was making the decision to basically get rid of, all the stuff that is just waste, like, basically carbs. And I just kind of went lazy keto, which is a good way to describe it. And by doing that, I became more cognizant of how I was feeling and what I was taking on as fuel, because it wasn't like, oh, my day is so screwed, I'm gonna get a double cheeseburger at the like local greasy thing while I'm driving by and like actually enjoy this 30 minutes. And it turned into, no, you need to be very mindful of what you're eating. And so I went pretty hardcore. It's like, no, bread's poison for me because I can't stop and I'm an addict with that stuff. So it's like, a sourdough loaf of bread in our house just gets like creamed through. And it's like, nah, we need to get rid of that. And then I went in and my wife's like, I'm 100% behind you and I'll help you. I said, great. And the nice part about it, or the thing I'm proud of the most, is that I went and told my son I was going to do it. And he was, younger. And, he's junior high pudge ball kind of a thing. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. He's like, really? I'm like, yep, I'm going to let you watch. He goes, okay. And same thing with my daughter. And my wife has always been very like amazing cook. She is absolutely gorgeously gorgeous. And
She is.
she is unreal. And it was like, okay, here we go. And it was just one day. And it was like, because people are counting on me and I need to be here as long as I possibly can. And I need to be in good shape. I need to be healthy. I need to be able to jump up and down off of, equipment and stuff like that and move quickly. And I just kind of just like anything else, it's like just tenacity. It's like, let's go. And I did that, and I, burned down about 80 pounds and feel good. And I feel younger than I've ever felt before. And I don't feel old. I feel like I'm getting younger. And because of that, being very mindful of what I'm eating, and I definitely backslide and kind of, like, I've been good for a long time. Maybe we can have some of this stuff. And then I can get into a bad trend. And then all of a sudden gotta stop it. So I, get on a scale every morning. And if it goes up, I don't have lunch. And if it goes down, then I feel pretty good about myself and have a cup of coffee and get on with my day. And so for me, watching that, now my son decided to kind of take that route. And so he's playing water polo, which is the hardest thing you can possibly do in the world. Absolutely loves it. Working out, like his health journey is totally different than mine was at that age. And he's going to stay fit and be very cognizant of what he eats and move forward in that for probably the rest of his life. And I think that was as proud of my family as I am, I think that'll be a really multi-generational transition, so that my son will be in shape his whole life. And if he's in shape his whole life, his kids will be in shape, and they will view food differently than we did, where it was like, it just my grandmother made delicious foods and stuff like that, but it was like mashed potatoes and gravy and this and that, which I absolutely love and I will eat a bucket of. But at some point you have to go, what am I putting inside myself? And is it serving me, or is it moments of pleasure with a negative downside? And for me, it was like, no, we're going to have to fix this. And by fixing it, it is absolutely transformed my life in a really, really positive way. And it makes me much more interested in, just my general health in, quite honestly, in general, going, where are all of my biomarkers at? Right. And what do I need to do to combat things I'm feeling? I mean, I'm 48 years old, which is definitely, I don't feel 48. I feel like I'm in my 20s again. But certain things are going to start shifting. It's like, I'm going to lose testosterone and I'm going to do this. Things are going to go haywire. Women, it seems like they get, menopause and a bunch of other stuff that happens in life. And guys just don't even, like we were saying, just face straight ahead and just keep going through life. And like, don't realize that there's all these ups and downs that are all honestly happening to us too. But we're like, I don't know. It's kind of like driving a car that has no gauges, right? It's just a speedometer and you just pin it and you're like, go. But now understanding that, understanding what is happening inside of myself is super important, So that's my kind of journey. I'm definitely not a success story. I'm just like, you need to be pretty smart about what you're eating, and it's way easier than you think. It's way easier than you think. It's like if you're hungry at 3 p.m. because you haven't had anything to eat yet today, and you're over somewhere, it's like, oh, you can get 2 McDoubles with no pickle, no bun, no ketchup, and an iced tea at McDonald's for $6. And you can just crush that thing real fast. You got protein, you're satiated, and you're on your way. And I think we in America typically eat to be full rather than satiated. And when you kind of make that switch a little bit, having a steak and some asparagus, you're like, dude, I'm fine. This is good. Versus when they say, I bet you can't eat just one. That's the crazy part about that is they're not lying. That's like truth in advertising, because like once you have one of those chips, it bypasses that one thing inside of your brain and says, have another one, and you'll keep eating it and your gut will be full and your mouth will say, let's have some more of that. And it's like, oh geez, they biohacked me, right? They screwed me up hard, where I'm like, my brain just like that little, the person with the stop sign that's like, no, we're good. You're like, you're just freight training right through them and blasting them off to the side of the road. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh my gosh. And then you fall asleep and you're a big load and you're like, oh man, how did I gain 5 pounds in 2 days? Just bizarre. But for me, it was like, no, just keep moving. The more you move, the better the fuel, the better you're going to be. That was way too long. Sorry about that.
No, nothing's ever too long. And I want to back you up for a second. You are a success story, right? And you're continuing to be a success story. And I can tell you why that is. It's not because you lost the weight. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad you feel better and you feel younger. It's because of your kids.
Yeah. Totally. That's why most important.
That's why you're a success story.
Yes. Because it's like, it's, there's many forms of generational trauma. You know what I mean? And, if you can figure out one thing in your family that you can fix for the next generation, that's honoring and preparing. And if you do that, then they're going to live a better life because of it. Like, and that's just the truth.
And what really, like you said, it's not that hard. And the reason why it became easier for you, and this just because I've coached so many people I know, you got really clear on why you wanted to do it. Like,
yes,
abundantly clear. It took one visit to the doctor to go, you need to lose 50 pounds. I've been telling your dad that, right? Mm-hmm. About himself too. Is like, okay, cool, right? And he could have told you that 2 years before and it might not have struck the same chord. But here you're going, guess what? If I kick the bucket or something happens to me, there ain't nobody else. There's no backup plan, right? And so you got stupid clear.
Me up just saying it, but at some point, when my dad passed away, what I didn't realize happened was the guy that was holding the shield for me, my whole life was gone, and even though, my daughter's 20, my son's 16, when my daughter turned 18, there's a thing inside my head where it's like, this is a job I don't want to retire from. Right. I always, I went from daddy to dad at some point. And then at some point you're just like, they were crawling, they were walking, they were running, they were driving, they were leaving. And when I realized like I'll hold the shield for her however I can for the rest of my life, both my kids, both anybody I'm related to, my nieces, anybody. It's like, that's my job, because that's, silently in that old farmer kind of way. It's like that's exactly what my dad did. So many things didn't hit me because he's like, I handled that piece of it. And when he was gone, it was like, oh, okay. And having that realization of, if I'm gone, who's gonna protect these people? Not, and I don't mean I just mean, I want my kids to live a really great life, or live a better life than me. And my dad wanted me to live a better life than him, and my grandpa wanted my dad and all of my family, not just my dad, but my mom and everybody else. And my goal is like, okay, how do you become the best shield bearer you can possibly be, right? To have a strong body, to have a purpose, and to be as, try to be as mentally or emotionally as evolved as you can possibly be, right? No, don't be reactionary, be thoughtful, like all of those things. And the better I get at it, the fact that my kids will realize where I'm at and take it up further and farther, their kids will be better off, And for me, it's a total package. It's not just like, it wasn't just losing weight. It was losing weight. It was being a little bit more fit, a little bit more mindful, and then constantly trying to be a better person than I was yesterday. Because my whole life is like, every year at the end of the year, I look back at the person I was, and usually I'm just disgusted because I want to bury that person as deep as I possibly can, and then be better, so much better than next year than I was last year. And then it's just been years of just trying to do that each and every year, that maybe I am getting somewhere, hopefully. We shouldn't evolve into some form and then just lock in for the rest of our life. I hope I'm in the best shape I've ever been when I'm 60s, and mentally be in the best place I've ever been when I'm 60. No one should peak in high school. Nobody should peak in high school. You should peak when you're 85.
85. It's the goal.
Well, I mean, as opposed to the normal in our country, which is you get to, whatever it is, 45, 50, and then you just start to slowly decline until you eventually just run out of time. It's you want to be kicking ass into your 90s, and then you're just going to kick the bucket one day. Like one day it's just going to happen. It's not going to be oh, yep, here he goes, and in 2 years, here he goes, right? It's just going to happen. But the beautiful part about what you said is, or that I just want to point out things that people can, relate to their own story, is you got super clear.
Mm-hmm.
That made it easier. And you also asked yourself, is this appropriate? Like, is this food appropriate right now? Right? Yeah. Like you said, like, drinking wine is great. Drinking wine while you're going down the interstate, pouring a glass for you and all your buddies, that might not be the most appropriate thing.
Well, usually you're not drinking wine going down the intersappropriate right? And that's why I like wine bottles, because it's like a glass bottle, it goes on a table, and then you open it and you're there, Rarely are you passing a bottle to slug out of the top of.
You didn't grow up with the same dudes I grew up with. No,
I know, it's true.
No, the other, what I'm getting at, that is like grandma's mashed potato, like grandma's cooking, that has a contextually appropriate place, right?
Absolutely.
Holidays, or when you get to go see your grandma, but like going to KFC to try to mimic that feeling because you're overworked on a Tuesday, that's not the most appropriate thing for your health, right?
That, I think that's the best possible way to describe it, because food in general is like, it is a pleasure factory, and it's easy, and it's quiet, and it's cheap, and it's usually, we're the first society in the history of the world where if you are rich, you're thin, and if you're poor, you're fat. That is diametrically opposed, because that doesn't mean you're eating in abundance. It means that there's food being made so cheaply that you're keeping more of it than you're burning, right? And we think of value as I'm full versus that was delicious, right? If you go to the highest end restaurants there possibly are, you're getting very small portions of delicacies. And when you eat it, you're almost eating like all of it in one bite, and it's a flavor explosion, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And you're done with it, right? Versus the Big Mac that is just like formulaically made to have the right amount of fat, the right amount of sugar, the right amount of, sweetness, the right amount of crunch, the right amount of this. It is like, oh my gosh, we are 100%. Like even now you go to a McDonald's, it's not like fun anymore. It's like they're brown and dystopian, right? And you're not even going through a drive-through, and you're usually not going in. You're just ordering on an app, and you're sitting in your car and somebody brings it to you. And you're like, this can't be good. You know what I mean? It just can't be. Versus going and, getting some ground beef or wild game, which is just amazing, and just lighting some coals and grilling it up a little bit and flipping it and throwing some, root vegetables kind of a thing on there and throwing it on a plate. The level of satisfaction you get from all of that and the satiation you get from all of that is pretty magnificent, man. I'm always blown away by once you kick that addiction part of it, and it's going to take you a good 2 weeks, man. It is like quitting smoking or quitting anything. You're going to feel like shit, and your body will get through it. And once you get through it, you can lock in. And having a purpose is that thing, right? Nobody's going to do anything for themselves. Like, because we're the first people we let down. You know what I mean? It's easy to let yourself down because that little voice inside of your head that's saying, yeah, let's just go for it. That is your brain telling you to let yourself down. And that's usually the hardest thing to stop listening to. It was for me anyway. I mean, I used to say no one hates Keith Saarloos more than Keith Saarloos. And my wife got real upset about that one day. And I was like, she's like, do you think I'm an idiot? I love you. And I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay. I'll do this for you. I'll do this for you guys because I definitely wouldn't do it for me. And by doing it for other people and having a purpose is pretty important.
100%. And it's what's funny is, well, not the funny part. I'll get to that in a minute. That's exactly why we do what we do, because people have they don't realize what their stress response, how that actually impacts their entire life. They think like, oh, I just eat, I just cope with food whenever I'm feeling XYZ way.
Totally.
And yeah, you do, but that's a microcosm of your entire situation. So we need to untangle that a little bit. But if I went to a farmer, Keith, and I said, hey, guess what? This year, we're not going to prepare the land. We're just going to kind of take what comes to us, and we're just going to put some stuff out there. Okay. And then we're just going to kind of like drive around and look at it. And like, if it's convenient for us, we'll make it look better or whatever. But then we'll just see what we have left at the end of the year. And they would look at you like they're absolutely crazy if you said that.
They'd punch you in the face. They honestly would. You know what I mean? It's like,
but if I said, hey, I need you to prepare your food because tomorrow you're going to be super stressed at lunchtime and you're not going to know where or what or how to eat, they're going to be like, bro, that's too much work. I'm like, really? Too much work? Is that true?
If you're talking about farmers directly, you know what I mean? The fact that those men and women will put 18 hours in ripping, disking, doing this all day, like I went to the chiropractor for the first time like a couple days ago, like because I'm like, my neck is driving me nuts and I didn't know why, and it was because I was hitting the top of the cab in the tractor. And I was like walking in, and my wife's like, I don't know if you're hurt or you just walk like that now, right? And so, and to your point, I went in and he's like, so what, what? I go, I've never done this before. It hurts here. And he's like, you've never been in a chiropractor? I'm like, no. He's like, what are you doing? I go, I'm a farmer or whatever. And he goes, boy, this must be bad. Then I go, what do you mean? He goes, the only time we get farmers in here, he's like, your wife asked you to come? I'm like, no, kind of a thing. But they're like the last.
You were like, you want to start a podcast?
Yeah, totally. Hey, let's not look at each other. And so I went in and he just like, all right, hold on here, bud. And he goes in and just whack. And I went, oh, and just started laughing, because it was such this great relief thing. And I walked out and I'm like, holy cow, I can move my head all over the place. This is great. But when you're talking about like farmers don't go to the doctor, they don't do anything. they bear down, right? And if you're talking about how do you change a farmer's mindset, is one, you're like, do you want to be here for 5 years or do you want to be here 20? And every single one of them will say 20. Every single one. Because farmers have gotten used to putting everything in front of them or putting themselves last and putting everything else first. That is the mindset of a farmer. I'm last, everything else comes first. And when you brought up that, would you just go out and just throw seeds out, or would you rip? Would you disc? Would you prepare? And they're like, oh, you got to do this. You got to get out there. And they'll do it for 18 hours nonstop without saying a word about it, right? But when you're like, hey, you got to do this for yourself, they're like, no. And you're like, no. If you would just do this, and if you would get to their wives, or if it's a woman who's farming and you get to their husband and you're like, I need you to do this. Can you please just hand this to him, to her, to your spouse? Because you're not going to do it for yourself. They'll do it. They might do it for you. And that will, because once you get into that little mindset of like, this is the factor. This is how this runs. This is how this machinery runs. Like every farmer will go out there in the morning, hands frozen, and go out there with a grease gun and pump grease into every single nipple on a piece of equipment nonstop to make sure that everything is running perfectly, running smoothly, checking oil, doing this, because they understand that that machine will provide for them, right? That mindset that you guys are talking about is like, if you can get that into the farmer going, hey, this is your meat puppet that we're all piloting around with our brain, you need to take care of this machine just as much as you need to take care of that piece of equipment. Because if you die, the farm's over. If something happens to you, it's done. Just like if something happens to your combine or your tractor during harvest season, you're done. Yeah. So they will go to the ends of the earth, preparing every little thing, making sure everything's just right. Exactly what you're saying. If you get if you make it easy, like lazy keto for any farmer, like lazy keto, just like, you know what? Don't get fries. Don't eat a bun. Mustard, meat and cheese. And iced tea, not sweet tea, iced tea or coffee. That's your diet now. They're like, really? That's it? Yeah. Do it for a month. I bet you $100. Just do it for a month. The stuff will just fall off you. You'll feel better. You used to have to your hip would hurt, or your knee would hurt, or you were slowly getting down off of a trailer. Now you're going to jump. It's like, don't you wish you could jump? Yep. And that for me was, once I started seeing those little bits and pieces of it, it was like, oh, this is the right thing to do. And then you just get locked into that mindset. And then pretty soon it's just like every other piece of equipment. You're like, I just need to take care of it. I need to push it forward. This thing's taking care of me. Once you lock in that mindset, you're done. It's easy.
Yeah. And too, the other thing too, that you haven't quite touched on, but I know is a part of it is, well, Daddy didn't do it that way. So why do I need to do that? Well, Daddy ain't never went on a diet.
Yep.
And he's been just fine, or he's just barely overweight. Well, yeah. Well, Daddy 30 years ago, 50 years ago, didn't have half the foods that are available now.
Totally.
And I can tell you his health from a 20-year standpoint of where you're at in your life and where he was at in that time in his life, the world looks vastly different.
Yep.
Also, Daddy used to combine without a cab. So unless you want to go back to that, if we're going to have that mentality, let's just go back to all the equipment Daddy used to use too. Oh. That don't sound too good, does it?
And if you're going to do that, you're like, well, I'm pretty sure Grandpa used to smoke and Dad used to smoke. Do you smoke? And it's like, no. It's like, you throw Zen in? Yep. It's like, well, that's better than smoking, right? And they're like, yeah. So it's like, you got to do that little bit and piece of it. Like, you don't have to give up everything, but you can make better decisions than you did before. But 100% we'll totally agree with you.
Yeah, and so I think we just found the thesis to which we're going to speak to the next at the next farming convention we go to, because my dad's heavily involved with Arkansas Farm Bureau, and we will be speaking with those individuals one day. one day soon. So I think we've got the
We've got
I think
it.
we got the foundation
Well,
of the
Thank you, Keith.
thesis.
Well,
Thank you, Keith.
no. If you want to talk about that even more, I think one of the more interesting parts about it is, the most important piece of equipment on any farm is you, right? And we all know that farming is going to kill you. I give a vineyard tour every day, and I'm like, farming will kill me. It just will. It is. If you take all of the things that are dangerous jobs, agriculture is like number one. And if you take like 2 through 10 and triple them, it's still not number one. My dad died in an agricultural accident. I will, every single farmer I know has been on 2 wheels at least once in a tractor, right? Almost flipped it, almost this, like that close. And for me, like we were testing a new piece of equipment. It wasn't a 3, it was a tractor. And anyway, it had 2-wheel braking, not 3-wheel braking. And I locked up the 2 rear wheels and I slid down a hill, right? And I was like, oh, geez. Whew. And like, oh, that was bad. Like I've been in bad motorcycle stuff, but it was like that could have been it. Like it's one of those things. About 2 hours later, I was talking to my wife and she's like, how's it going? I said, oh, I'm ripping. And I did this. I said, oh man, I slid down the hill. I was trying that new tractor out and it locked up and I slid down the hill and I had to drive it out of a skid and I could have flipped it and killed myself. Jeez Louise, because she knew where I was. And she goes, what are you doing right now? I said, oh, I'm doing what I was doing when I slid. And she goes, hold, stop. I go, okay. She goes, take the keys out and throw them as far as you possibly can. I said, what are you talking about? She goes, if you were driving a car and you went to the top of a road and you drove down a hill and it locked up and you slid and skidded down a hill, what would you do to that car? You get out, you throw the keys as far as you possibly can and call the company and say, come pick it up. She goes, but you're out there doing the thing that almost killed you? I said, yeah, it has to get done. Right? So that's that farming mentality you're talking about, right? When you think about that, the part that gets even scarier is every year we're losing more farms than we're adding. We just are, because the family farm is like you're bringing your kids up in this life. Either they're, like you said, we'll go back to the thing. They're either going to love it and they're going to be better at it than you, or they're going to hate it and not do it. So they're going to say, there's easier ways to make money than this. Or I hate getting up at, 2 a.m. and working for 19 hours. I could make more money and just be a truck driver or just be this or something easier that doesn't give me all of the stress of the family farm. And because of that, we're losing farms each and every year because the risk, the reward ratio is completely skewed out. So when you're talking to the Arkansas Farm Bureau, every single one of those farmers we need to keep alive and healthy for as long as humanly possible, because there's no one coming in to backfill, right? No one's coming in to take over that small family farm that's been providing for multiple generations. When that farm gets sold, it's either going to become a row of houses or some company's going to come in and some corporation's going to buy it and just add it to a portfolio. And that's it. Like we've lost 500, what was it? 500,000, some crazy number. It's 50,000, 500,000 cattle operations that are just never going to come back because no one's going to go out and buy that big, huge chunk of land, work, figure out how to do it, buy the cattle, move them in, and make a run at this thing. Nobody's going to do that. It's insane. Because if you don't know somebody didn't teach you how to do it and you're starting from ground 1, 0, that risk is so massive that you're not going to do it.
Right.
And if we want, as my grandfather said, as the American farmer goes, America goes. The thing I'm very excited to see is there are more and more and more people that are seeing it on a smaller level, where people are like, their aspirational dream is 40 acres. Right. And some animals and growing some of their own food. That's their aspiration. Right. I'm excited to see like the blue collar workforce coming back, where I know kids that are graduating from college and are becoming electricians and becoming plumbers. And because they're like, man, you can make a pretty good living doing this. And I like the work. Right. So I think that swing is coming back. Just like the food pyramid was upside down, the whole go to college and get a job and work in a cubicle. People are like, I don't want to do that with my life. I want to do something where I can go in and fix it and make it better and be excited about it. But the highest possible level of that to me is farming. Because once, like I said, once you grow something from the ground, once you see something green come out of that dirt that you grew, that you ripped, that you dissed, that you put all that into, it is, again, it is that vain attempt at pregnancy of saying, oh, look at this thing. I will do anything to protect it. And where you're talking about food and health and nutrition and mindset, all you have to do is change that farmer's mind, like not even a quarter turn. You know, that quarter turn is you're not giving up anything. You're investing into your future. Because the double cheeseburger, fries, mayo, and a milkshake, that tastes good right now, but that's sawing years off of the productivity that you have on that farm. And the more you get that buried into their brains, the more they're going to, change. If anybody ever quit smoking, great. The next thing you need to do is change your diet. And quite honestly, changing your diet probably will be more impactful than quitting smoking, in all honesty.
I would go ahead and venture to say that the title of the presentation is farming will kill you. We're gonna see how much of an interest we can get to that one with that one.
I kind of feel like we need like Keith on a stick with us.
Keith on a stick?
Oh yeah. You want me to yell at a bunch of Arkansas farmers? No problem.
I think if we bring wine, I think we might be able to bring Keith on this adventure. Yeah. Definitely Keith on a stick.
Keith on a stick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day Keith's gonna write a book or something of the
Definitely
something
not
of
writing
the
a book.
He's gonna put knowledge into the world, be it a podcast, be it a something. Instagram is the medium as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're gonna collect it. It's gonna be the Saarloos philosophy.
Oh, I'm 100% willing to pay someone to go through all of my Instagram, copy and paste it, and put it in book form and edit it. I've already written the book. If somebody just wants to do that, no problem. Great.
I can tell you that Keith is part-time farmer, full-time philosopher.
Yeah.
And no time mayor.
Pay well.
I had one of our kiddos got a new therapist, and he's like, I'm a pastor during the day, but I do this at night because being a pastor doesn't pay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hear you. I hear you.
That is 100% of it. But that farmer work ethic, or the philosophy thing, you spend a lot of time thinking, it just on a tractor or doing anything you're doing where your hands are moving. I try to consume 2 books a week, like just podcasts or listening to a book and chewing through it and thinking about it while I'm doing, something else. And my dad had a great saying, and it's fun to hear it come back from like other farmers and cowboys and stuff, where it's like, well, you can think while you're working, right? It's like, you don't have to sit there and not think. If you're working, your brain could be a billion miles away working on something else or trying to cram it in. But I just know I'm not an intelligent person, but I like very complicated concepts, and then I just have to dumb it down all the way for me, right? And it's like I do a lot of that. So it's not philosophy, it's just trying to understand very complicated things in a way that I can say it out loud for myself and have it actually be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
We get it. Yeah, we say gut microbiome, and people look at us sideways. So I'm like, okay, how do you say that? The little guys that live in your gut, they need something too. How about we feed them something? Yeah.
The guys working down in the crap factory really need to be taken care of, because if they revolt, you're in big trouble.
Can I see your sourdough starter on your counter, and let's start there.
Yeah, my mom's got one of those going right now. She travels with it, which just blows my mind. Like, this is my starter. I'm putting it in my bag. It's for my carry-on.
That's commitment, Keith. That is commitment, all right?
A bunch of psychos in my family.
Well, we've got the full roundup now, so we'll have us speaking, us and Keith speaking. Keith will bring the wine. Keith's mom will bring the sourdough.
Oh yeah.
Well, and Linda's not that far from us, so we actually,
Oh, that's
Linda
right.
and Brielle aren't that far.
That's right. She's down in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could actually bring them in house and have Linda and Brielle and Keith all together.
That's a pretty good way to get me to go anywhere. It's like, you want to go hang out with your mom and your daughter? It's like, yep. Those two have their own. We started talking about family and stuff, but it's like the fact that my mother and my daughter, who's a sophomore in TCU, hang out all the time is makes me one of the happiest parts of my life, where my mom invites my daughter over with a bunch of her girls from her sorority, and they all go over to my mom's house and watch The Bachelor and hang out. And my mom's like, "Hey, we're going to the basketball game at TCU tonight," and my daughter is sitting next to my mom. I'm like, "Geez, you guys are going to college together or something like that?" My mom's like, "Yeah, it's great. I love it." That brings so much happiness to me. It's so great to watch. Awesome.
Yeah, that is super special. I got to do something very similar to that. I did not take as much advantage of it as I should, but my mom's parents lived in Fayetteville when I went to the University of Arkansas, and we would go over. I would go over, not as often as I should have, looking back, for just to do laundry.
Yeah.
Like she would cook a meal and come do your laundry here, so you don't have to do it in the dorm or, whatever, godforsaken place we were living. And so, or at the fraternity house, God forbid. And so anyway, I can concur with that. That sounds like a lot of fun. Actually, I might make that my future goal, to go to college, or excuse me, to go to the town in which my grandchildren go to college at.
Yeah.
If they go to college, wherever they reside.
My mom figured that one out, man, because it's like, after my dad died, she spends half her year here and then half her year watching TCU. My brother's the head coach for TCU baseball, and so my mom just likes competition of any sort. So she goes to every single game, and she's like, "Well, baseball season." So I literally dropped my daughter and my mother off at the airport for them both to go back to college, after Christmas. And I'm like, tearing up a little bit, because I'm like, there goes two of the three women I love. Okay. And I watched them, I watched them check their bags in, because I was making sure they're good, kind of a thing. And then they're walking over to security, and I'm just waving, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I just want to make sure you're good. That was, I got to take care of both of you."
I've been to the Santa Barbara airport. You can see from the front door to the back of the plane.
You can.
From in that airport, which it's pretty unique in terms of, and it has set up.
We're lucky because we have Santa Barbara Airport, and then we have San Luis Obispo, and San Luis Obispo has a direct flight from Dallas to San Luis Obispo twice a day, which is pretty great. It's a good.
Dang,
we could go float.
See, you should.
We could go float.
You've been talking to Keith already.
Oh, you go to the Central Coast float?
Yeah, we went the last time he was in town.
Are we going to talk about floating now?
Okay, that's probably the last conversation you and I had, because
did I turn you on to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you had prepared me for what this experience could be. Okay. And so it was so funny, because we walk into the float, and a lot of people think that when we're together, we're a couple, and we get it because male, female. And so they're like, "You want one together?" And we're like, no. We're gonna do separate things.
I wouldn't even do that I wouldn't even do a float with my wife. It's like, no, that's not the point of this.
No. So he gets the big one. He got the couples one all by himself.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't touch the sides?
Yeah. I don't want to touch the sides. No. I want to be able to just go whatever and just not touch anything. This is
by the way, this is what we're an hour and 30 minutes in. Now we're getting into the good part of the story. So, let's talk about the crazy shit. Let's go.
So we got our chocolate before we started the float. We made sure that we bought their special chocolate before we went in. And so I have one in my.
Wait, you went in altered?
Yes.
Okay.
You told me to.
Well, I didn't. Well, maybe, but I just wondered.
Keith was like, well, that kind of does sound like something I would do.
That does.
I'm like, you told me to.
But I'm always surprised when people accept that advice. You know, it's like,
Take his advice.
keep going.
I asked you a question and you were you seemed very informed and very passionate about the answer.
Yeah.
And so I go in and I'm laying there this entire time and I'm like, Keith said it was going to be like this experience. And I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
And I keep hitting the sides.
Yeah,
and
that
I keep
doesn't
hitting
help.
the sides.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it. It was not, I think I totally overthought it.
Yeah.
I need to do it again. And then so we end up meeting when he gets out. And I'm like, did you have the thing? Like, did the thing happen to you? Was this amazing experience for you? And we just sat in silence on the couch and had tea.
Yeah. Was it an amazing experience?
I'd
Not
do it
for
again.
you.
Oh.
What about for you?
Not for you, Stacy. No.
I'm sorry. I forgot you two were friends and I'm just here to be a support system.
No. But you're like, did you have it and you were waiting for it? So did it happen for you?
I will say this. It took me, I needed to do it twice as long.
Yeah.
Because it took me almost the entire time to shut my brain off. And I mean, that's not even the correct definition, but you know, to get it quiet enough in my head to have a weightless experience, I guess is what you want to say.
Yeah. Did you
and
have the
so,
thing where, so you usually like so we should probably talk about, so it basically what we're talking about is a sensory deprivation chamber.
right.
And you go in,
we should describe
it. And so it's high salinity. You go in, you close the doors, it's pitch black, it's soundproof. You have earplugs in basically, and you're floating in water that is body temperature, and you're floating up to your ears. So because of this high salt content. So the whole thought process behind this is this, for me anyway. And this is how I would describe it to anybody. I think anybody should do it. I think every single person should do it, because we are a lot of people, like in their first time, I always tell everybody buy double. So if it's usually an hour, buy 2 hours, because you're going to spend the first hour, like you're talking about, your body is going to be like, what's going on? Hey, what's happening? Right? You're probably get like a little, like that jolt shake where your body is going, is everything okay here? Is everything okay here? And your fingers are like popping and you're like, what's happening? And you're staying way too conscious of the experience. Right. So the next step of that is once you get past that. And for me, like, it is my greatest form of therapy. That's the best way I can describe it, because usually, like if you go to a therapist, what they're doing is they're trying to bring things out of you so you can talk through it yourself. And when you start doing the sensory deprivation tank and you're laying there, and once you kind of start getting into it, your brain realizes, oh, we don't have anything to do. And at some point, for me, you realize, like when I said you're piloting this meat puppet around, kind of a thing.
It's my new favorite term.
It's true. It's like we have a brain inside of our head that's basically hamburger meat with electricity in it, right? I don't know.
It's amazing.
And then you're laying there in a tank where you're not getting any stimulation. You're not seeing anything. You're not hearing anything. You can't even feel anything. So at that point, you're basically electrified hamburger meat floating in nothing. And for me, and for a lot of people that I've like tried to turn on to this, is you start having like conversations inside of your brain, and you start going through all the old paperwork. Like my office is just a clutter of just books and everything else. And all of a sudden your brain's like, okay, we don't have to worry about piloting the meat puppet. So what are we going to do? And you can have massive conversations with yourself, because every single one of us deserves in this world an hour of serenity, an hour of, I have nothing to work on. I have nothing to think about. I don't have to worry about anything. You're perfectly safe. You're floating in this thing. There's no sensory overload coming in. Like right now, I've got 2 screens going, there's lights everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And it's almost like when you're laying in bed and you're just staring up into the ceiling of, of the blackness above your bed, and you start thinking through some stuff. And for me, it's where I untie all the big bag of knots. It's almost like your brain reaches into that one cardboard box, pulls out that ball of Christmas lights that's all knotted up, and then you just kind of start untying it. And the more you untie it, the more that you realize that some of the things that you're anxious about, you go, well, why am I anxious about that? I shouldn't be anxious about that. And your brain goes, okay, we won't be anxious about that anymore. Because one of the things that I have found personally is as a person of faith, as a person, philosophy to a certain extent, I rarely get to focus my total attention on nothing. And I find that to be a place where I pray pretty heavily, that I talk to God in my own head and I get answers back because there is nothing else that's there competing for my attention. And I highly suggest it to anyone, because when you get to the places where you think something's such a big deal, and then your brain kind of works through it and goes, that's not really that big of a deal, you can change that. And that little voice in your head that's always so hard on you sits in the back seat. And as a friend of mine said a long time ago, and I constantly bring this in there with me when I'm thinking about it, is your self-talk should not be an asshole, even though usually it is. Your self-talk should be the world's greatest coach talking to an 8-year-old. And if you can have that voice in your head win, saying, hey man, it's okay. It's okay, buddy. We're going to get him next time. You can get up. You're okay. Dust you off. Like that world's greatest coach and talking to an 8-year-old. And you can let that voice come to the front. You can untangle so many knots or let go of so many things that you didn't need to hold on to. It's like packing for a trip where you think you're going to, like always, the first time I pack for any trip, I pack like I'm going to shit my pants 3 times. And then there's like, I'm bringing like 8 pairs of underwear and way too many socks. And like, how many pairs of pants do I need and stuff like that? And then you're like, no, I don't need all this stuff. It's like, I need 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, couple pairs of underwear. And by the way, there are stores wherever you're going, so you'll be okay, Right. And to me, it's like, oh, you don't need to bring 3 bags everywhere you go. Sometimes you just need your pockets. And if you get to the point where you're just carrying the stuff you need to carry in your pockets, you get to start thinking about level 10 problems. So for me, going back to the health journey, that all kind of started in there, where it's like, you need to be around a while, man. How are you going to fix this? How are you going to unscrew this problem? And for me, those tanks, like I'm due to go, in all honesty. That those things are absolutely awesome if you give yourself the amount of time that you need to really get into it. And I always think that's the moment when you can see like auroras, and I don't usually, I go in unaltered now because I'm like, I know what I'm doing. Like when you're like laying there and then you can see like auroras, like colors a little bit, like kind of rolling around, and then you're like, oh wow, and you open your eyes and you still see them. Then you're like, oh, okay, my brain's just doing backflips now. This is great. Let's just lock in and see where this thing goes,
Now, what's coming to mind when you say that is you either need 2 hours,
yeah,
or in another setting, sure. or in another setting, you need 2 weeks, because there's no other thing that's going to get you that much less lower stimulation
Yes.
and clarity. The only other thing that I could think that would do that is going out in the woods,
Yes.
but you're going to need
Same thing.
minimum 2 weeks to be away from a phone, to be away from other people, to be away from normal food or whatever it is. Like, I think about like these rewilding retreats that certain companies do, like where it's a dopamine reset, basically.
Motorcycle trips. I think that's the only other thing that I've found to be the same thing, where it's like, okay, I'm going to lock myself in this helmet and we're going to do, 1,000 miles. And your brain is like, one part of your brain is like keeping you alive. And the other part of your brain is like, man, I should have been a lot nicer to my 6th grade girlfriend. Like that it's just shit like that, right?
I think that's what people like. I think that's what people like running and hiking. To be honest with you, like long cardiovascular events, if they're not competing for a time, I think they like that because it actually like they can really shut their brain off because their executive function is just locked in. Hey, I'm just running. You know what I mean? Like it's
tractor work is the same thing for me. Absolutely the same thing, where you get into that monotonous thing, and going back to farmers, right? Like every farmer wants their rows perfect, because they're not painting with a paintbrush and they're not molding with clay. Their medium of art is a 5525N John Deere that turns diesel into noise and turns noise into perfect rows. And when you start getting into that mindset, it's the exact same place you're getting to, where you are in that flow state, you are in that zone. You can say that in athletics, but there's a lot of places that you can find that little niche and kind of lock into it. And that's why I think a lot of farmers get kind of addicted to that tractor work. Like they're always looking for a reason to get into the tractor, to fix something, to do something, to make something look just a little bit better. By doing that, you're trying to like show the world what you're doing a little bit. As Brooks Firestone said to me, when my wife says one day I'll look at her the way I look at him. He's like, that's an old joke, but it always gets a laugh. I love it. He called me and I was mowing, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm on a tractor mowing." And he said the most beautiful thing to me. And he goes, "Oh, everywhere you're going, the world's getting a little bit more beautiful today, huh?" And I was like, "Oh, baby, this is a man." This is a man that is speaking my love language. Like, yes,
I was just about to say mowing ditch banks is the equivalent to that.
There's certain things in life where it's like there's like certain like moments where you're like, oh, like that level. Like I felt it. Like when you were talking about mowing and stuff, there's a certain level of satisfaction that starts here and then just slowly trickles down all the way to your toes, and you get out and you. Like I've driven my wife or my kids out and I go, "Look at this shit," like that. And I'm like pointing at something. I'm like, look at that, and everything's like 1 inch mowed perfectly. Everything's at attention. And you're just standing there and you're like this. Oh, look at that shit. And they're like, "What?" And you're like, "What? Look at that. It is immaculate. It is perfect. I mean, look like that." And they're like, "Hey, real great, Dad." And I'm like, "You do what? You do not understand, because I just spent 20 hours just absolutely manicuring our vineyard, right? Like our vineyard is the most photographed vineyard in Santa Barbara County, cover of the phone book, all of that. And I take that with pride, right? Why? Because if my dad made it look this good, I'm going to make it look this good, right? And so at the end of it, it's like I've cried. Like no shit, man. I am not embarrassed to say I've been sent, and I'll creep. Like I'll be in my truck, foot off the gas, that just kind of that roll thing, looking at it going. I mean, a lady made, you see this? A lady made a quilt of our vineyard. A quilt.
Is that Ballard?
Yes. Like there's the terrace coming down right there.
Oh my gosh.
And like getting out there. So that mindset, it's like at the end of it, it's like, what do I want to be happy or do I want to be satisfied? And the truth is I want to be satisfied. So we've been talking for 2 hours, but I always go back to the thesis of there's two things in life and you have to pick one. You can either be happy or you can be satisfied. It's very tough to be both. It's very tough to be both, because if you look at anything like, happiness is Netflix, right? You just sit on your couch, just, you didn't have to do shit. You just came home and you're just flipping through stuff. And there is everything you've ever wanted to watch. Everything. But I find myself going, man, I remember when I would ride my bike to Blockbuster
Oh my
and
gosh.
walk
Yes.
in and be like, what? Oh, they got it. It's finally out, right? I got this one. I got this one. Tonight is going to be lit, right? And then you go home, you call your friends, come on over. I got both these movies. We're going to have pizza. We're going to watch this shit. It's going to be awesome. Da-da-da. Let's go. That's satisfying, right? The satisfaction of going to a record store and flipping through music and finding a new album. What is this? What is this? Hey, who is this? Somebody go, oh, you like that? You should try this. Like all of that community-based thing. But it took effort, right? You had to get up off the couch. You had to go somewhere. You had to do a thing. You had to put in the work. Then companies said, well, how about you just don't do anything? And we'll just pump that shit straight to your phone. Every song you've ever wanted to hear ever. And every movie you've ever wanted to see ever. And you're like, yeah, that'd make me happy. That'd be great. And now we have it and we don't care. Like I listen to the same music I still listen to. I'm not looking in like new stuff. I'm like listening to the stuff. I haven't found new music in a long time, even though I constantly am looking for new music. So go back to the happiness versus satisfaction. Happiness is like Disneyland, where it's all done and you're walking in and you're paying for it. You're happy and you leave and it's over. Just like that bag full of Ruffles, right? I can eat that whole bag. I feel full and I feel kind of sick. I don't really like it, but that made me happy. Versus the satisfaction of being in that tractor for that long, making something look absolutely perfect, even if nobody gives a shit. That deep sense of satisfaction of growing something from the ground, turning it into something else, making it. It was hard. It beat the crap out of you at every single turn. But then at the end of it, you're like, how do you feel? And you're like, I'm satisfied. Are you happy? Probably not. But you're so satisfied that you're willing to go get up and go do it again next year. And that to me is like the great thievery that has happened in just American culture, or just maybe worldwide culture, is they took away our satisfaction and they gave us happiness. And now we don't have either. And if you want to be happy, the only way to get to happiness is to do something so hard that is worthy of your effort, that by the end of it, you feel satisfied with your effort that you have put in. You have no metric against anybody else. You're not competing with anybody else. You deep down know if you are satisfied with the effort that you have put in. Because that was always a question that my old man would ask me, and I asked my son. It's like, hey, I'm done. And he's like, well, are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with what you've done? And usually I'd go, no. And then go back out there and do it again. Very rarely I'd say, yep, because I was racing to the end, right? I wanted to be happy that I was finished. But it felt so much better to put it all the way out there. Like we'll go back to the very beginning, like the marketing, the bottles, the wine, the effort, all of it is, I am a very tenacious person. And my goal is not happiness. My goal is satisfaction. I want to do everything to the point where I feel satisfied with what I've written and posted on Instagram, even though I don't care if one person likes it or a million people like it. I did that for me and I liked it because I needed to give myself a pep talk this morning, and I did it early. And then I put it out there, and if it helps somebody else out, awesome. I love it. But my whole goal is total satisfaction. It's like I want to go all the way in everything that I do, to the point where I go, did you leave it all on the field? And if the answer is yes, then I'm good. Like when the good Lord greets me, I have one goal in my life, just one. And I've asked this question to a lot of people, and I'll pose it to you guys, is because of my faith, I've constantly asked myself, what do I want God to say to me when I meet him? And my answer to that is, here comes a man after my own heart.
Mm.
If God says that to me, I did it right. Like, that's my goal. My goal is to be a man after God's heart. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. It means I'm probably a prick to people sometimes. I'm going to fail a billion different ways, but I don't want to leave. I don't want to be the person who buried their talent. I don't want to be the person that didn't try as hard as they possibly could. I didn't want to be the person that if I had a chance to help somebody, I didn't. I don't want to walk by trash or litter and not pick it up. If I throw something at the trash can, I don't walk away. I go back, I pick it up, and I put it away. If somebody needs a hand, then I just say, hey, can I give you a hand? Can I help you? Yeah, sure. They're not big. You know, it's not these heroic moments. It's just these really small opportunities to either do A or B. And I want to choose the A. And the more I do that, the better I feel and the more satisfied I become. But at the end of the day, it is incredibly hard to be alive. It's incredibly hard to pilot this meat puppet around while everybody else is doing the same. And we're all chasing things that are really quite meaningless, status or money or this or that. At the end of the day, I always go back to community. If somebody else believes something totally different from me, I want to talk to them. I don't want to judge them. I don't want to do anything, but I want to hear their point of view, because more information can change my mindset. I don't want to be locked into an ideology that can't be changed, right? I want to hear everybody's point of view, and hopefully it changes mine for the better, so I can help somebody else down the road. So I always think, like, what's my goal in life? My goal in life is to reach that point where when I do, when I'm walking through the pearly gates or whatever it is, some Renaissance painting that I've made up in my head, but I know it's going to be way cooler than that. I'm greeted with, here comes a man after my own heart. That's the goal.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how we're going to wrap it up after that.
I think we let it be good.
This was fun, by the way. I had no idea what we were doing, so it worked out pretty
well. And here's my ask, Keith. I'd like to do this again. Maybe we do this quarterly.
Yeah, whatever you want. I'll talk way too long.
No, it's not long enough. Except, I mean, he has to get his kid. But here's why.
Let me ask you a question before you do that.
Yeah.
Is this what you guys hope for? Did your audience, like who you're putting this out for, the mindset, did we run it down the middle, or is this way out in left field?
Nope. Here's what I'm going to give you. We really do this for us.
Yeah.
And if anybody listens to it or likes it or downloads it, we started this for us as two friends with a common vision that wanted to have an impact. And if nobody listened, that we would be content that it was for us. So we had no expectations. I was super curious to be kind of like, what is God going to do with this? This is 10 years in the making from I emailed a stranger, and there's more stories that we have more time to tell that I can't wait for us to get into. But here's my selfish ask for having you back, is that you tell stories in his language for a life that he's still in and just a little bit behind.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell stories from
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
He's a little bit younger.
How old
he's
are
30.
You?
30.
He's 30.
30. Still have your dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we still actively, my dad and uncle still actively farm.
Yep.
And so I got to watch a piece of him come to life.
Oh, yeah.
That I hadn't ever seen.
Sure.
When he was on the farm. And I got to be out there, and I was like a little kid on a playground, except when I tried to play with a cottonmouth snake that I didn't know was a friend or a foe.
Do that.
It's fine. It was fine. It's harmless. And so because you're born of the same cloth, right? Like
Sure.
this is who you are, and you're also who our clients are and who we're stepping in front of.
Yeah.
You bring a perspective to this industry that is so valuable, not only because of how your family values are, but what was passed on to you from your dad
Sure.
that you get to tell. Now, I got to be a small piece of that story of getting to know your dad and your mom, and it's still getting to know you, but being here with you reminds me of like, hey, a vision that I had 10 years ago, even though we don't live in the valley anymore. I know that we get to go back, but you bring such a valuable perspective to health and family and legacy. And it brings out, it's a voice in his life that I love getting to be a part of and watch. And because it's our clients too.
Yep.
And we will be in Farm Bureau, which I think is hysterical. A girl from, Tarzana going to the Arkansas Farm Bureau. I mean, that's just funny. That's just funny. Or me on a combine or standing at the top of a grain bin, not, climbing all the way to the top. It's a life I didn't know of. And so it's a conversation I want to keep having because I think it's important, especially that we get to.
Yep. The thing I would say to anybody, and especially if you're talking to farmers, in a farm bureau or whatever, is a lot of them are doing it because their dad did, and they grew up in it, and it's a life they know, right? And it's a noble profession. It's a great profession. The thing I would say to anybody is, a lot of that changes the day you lose your dad. A lot of it, because that holding the shield thing or whatever. I've known a lot of guys who are doing something like this, and my dad said to a friend of mine who I was shocked when he said it. He goes, "Your dreams don't have to be your dad's dreams," and that kind of shook me a little bit because I was like, "What are you talking about? Your whole life is you living out your dad's dream, kind of a thing." And what I realized he was doing was giving him the opportunity to reevaluate. And if he really hated it, he would have quit. But he didn't. He went, no, this is my dream. And I watched him continue. And I didn't know about that. I didn't think about that until my dad passed away. And I had to sit there and go, is this my dream? Or am I living out this guy's dream? And when you're talking to a lot of farmers, every single one of them will understand that there's one line that is very powerful, which is you don't become a man until you lose your dad. Because if you're working with them, especially on a farm, you're not the captain. He might let you think you're the captain of the ship, but you're not the captain of the ship. Like when real bad shit happens, that's when like they step up and usually like, I'll handle this part. When you're almost kind of relieved by, in all honesty. When, the hard things of like going to talk to a bank or going to do this or negotiating with buying a piece of equipment, whenever you're like when he was gone for the first couple of years, I was like, son of a bitch, man, where are you? You left me with this shit, and I was not pissed, but it was like, you're on your own, bud. And it doesn't get, the weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. And when you go into the health aspect of it, the best thing you can possibly do for your health is to be around for the rest of your team as long as you possibly can. And for me, that was it. It's like, why do I need to lose weight? Because I want to be here a lot longer than I should be. And because I got a lot more to get done. And for me, that was it. And just to kind of wrap this up, it was a lot of that comes down to like that bottle you started off with. It's like if you look at that bottle, it says honor and then plus and prepare. And that's on purpose, because when I made the, the head marker for my dad's, or in the cemetery for my dad, I saw that there was a number where it started, there was a minus symbol, and there was a number where it ended. And most of what we do seems providential in the rear view, and that honor plus prepare is what we do while we're alive. That dash in between start and stop, there needs to be a plus symbol. And what are you doing while you're alive? And for us, it's honor and prepare. And if you're doing all of those things, if you're honoring those that have come before you, and you're preparing the way for those yet to come, you are living a selfless life. You are making sure the people above you who have gotten you there are admired and honored, and you're doing everything you can to prepare your kids so that one day they'll be ready for whatever comes on. Because when my dad died, I wasn't ready, but I was prepared. And then it got hard. And then it was like, you have to bear down and just get through it. And for me, mental health, physical health, trying to progress as a person, do the right thing, all of those things is a life that is a noble life, and it's an honorable profession. And in a world where people don't know what they do every day, they're just moving paperwork from here to there, or just sending emails, or now they're getting an email, they're putting in a chat GPT, the computer is writing back an email, and they're hitting send, and then they're doing the same thing. It's just computers talking to each other. There's zero satisfaction whatsoever. And by growing something from the ground, you get to do something. You get to be a part of the earth, and you get to make it better, and you get to make it more beautiful everywhere you go. And it is a good life. It is a really hard, well-earned life. And I suggest, like, if you're talking to those bureau, you could talk directly to an 80-year-old farmer. You can directly talk to the 16-year-old kid that this is the only thing he's ever wanted to do with his life, and he wants to do it better than his dad. And you talk to that middle-aged guy that's bringing that kid up, and you talk about any of those things, any of them. Take care of the machinery. Take care of your machine first. Take care of this machine first, and the rest will be a lot easier. You tell them that you could change generations instantly. I look forward to hearing from you guys. You guys are doing great.
So I think that was a yes.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I think that's a yes. We get to have Keith back.
That was a yes.
I'm so thankful you said yes.
Too long. I'm so sorry. You can cut. You're going to edit it, so that'll be great.
Actually, we don't edit our podcast.
I would. There's a whole bunch of crap in there.
No, we just wanted to say thank you, Keith, for your time today. I mean, I know you can put your hand, you can like do this awkward hands while we're on a podcast, so you'll accept the compliment because two dudes on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
You're a gift for the world. What your family does is a gift for the world. And you're just finding ways to express that gift every single day. And that's something we believe here in our practice and what we do with people. And so I want to leave with your typical podcast exit, which is, where can people get more of you?
Saarloos and Sons on pretty much everything. S is in Sam, AAR, LOOS is in Sam, ANDSONS. So saarloosandsons.com, Saarloos and Sons on Instagram. I only use Twitter really to talk about my brother's baseball team, which is fun. That's totally true. I literally got on Twitter and barely talk about wine. All I do is talk shit. I talk shit about TCU baseball on Twitter. That's like my little hobby over there. I'm like always like reposting like pictures because like TCU baseball pushes a bunch of stuff up there, and then if anybody says like talk shit on my brother, he does because he's like, I'm not really on Twitter that much anymore. I'm like, oh, I'm all over that thing, dude. Because somebody would be like, Saarloos sucks, and I'm like, burr, burr, burr. Like. Come right in, man. I'm like, oh, whoop your ass, buddy. It's like, oh, tell me about your life. What do you do? And I'm like, I noticed that you have done nothing with your life, and he is like this and this, and your opinion should matter. Oh my gosh, it's great. So I do that on X or Twitter or whatever it is. But yeah, saarloosandsons.com. I just redid our whole website myself, so it kind of sucks, but I did it me, so who cares?
Well, we appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, appreciate you. I don't know
We'll
how
get
we
to
say
do this
goodbye.
again.
Goodbye.
Yeah, we're just saying bye. We'll hang up on you now.
Good. See you.
Bye.